I heard the bell just a second ago, so we'll go ahead and get started. Looks like we've got a little bit of a thinner crowd today, but we'll still cover our lesson. I think Jeremy last week mentioned to you that he was going. We flipped lessons. We had kind of done that because Aaron and I and the kids had planned on being in Florida, but that obviously got changed when Bear decided to make an early entrance. We do have some that are out. I don't know who all, but I know the Curleys. Michael's brother-in-law did pass away, so we need to be thinking about them as far as the traveling and the things that are part of the executive part of the estate, the executive tour part of the state, and the estate, and the things that Mike has to do for that. Michael has to do for that. Trying to think of some of the others. So Erin should be coming home this week. She stayed up there, and I came back with Will and Jackson, so that way they could get to school. Jackson, interestingly enough, when he got to school, he got off the elevator at his apartment, and he had to put his stuff down there because he couldn't get down the hall because of all the dehumidifiers and fans in the hall. And he got to his room, and there were 8 dehumidifiers with hoses going to his bathtub, and like 20 fans, and all the baseboards gone and stuff. But he didn't have any damage, but he did have to find a place because they didn't tell anybody. Even corporate didn't know. So, yeah. But there is that. The update for Bear, I'll probably make an announcement after services, but he's doing very, very well. But I was going to read Hannah's card and everything, so that'll be after services. As I mentioned, well, let's go ahead and start with a prayer. I'm sorry. God, our Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for our chance to come together and study from your word about correction. God, we know that many times we sometimes try to have that right attitude, but sometimes it also eludes us. Even though someone has good points and is bringing up a just cause for the correction, we need to be mindful and look at the examples that we've been given throughout your word of those that responded correctly, but also those that did not respond in a worthy manner. God, we thank you for your word and the power of it and the law that it is, and the fact that we can go to it for correction in order to be more like you and the things that you want. God, we thank you for all the things that you've given us. We pray for those that we've mentioned and those that we may have forgotten to mention. God, we thank you for providing for those that have improved, and we ask that you continue to watch over them as they improve more. We also ask that you be with those that are awaiting upcoming procedures and waiting for medicines to work. God, we ask for their help as well. It's in your Son's name that we pray. Amen. So last week, Jeremy covered the lesson. We kind of flip-flopped, and this week we're going to talk about examining your attitude towards correction. That's lesson 6. Let's see, this page 29 in the pink book. I went ahead and got the right book for this lesson, so that way I was at least on the same page. It must feel like me, doesn't have enough energy, so. I don't know what I was saying a second ago now. Oh, no one likes correction. We don't like it because it implies that there is a deficiency that we have. We are lacking in an area, or we aren't doing something that we should be doing. Now that can be either real or imagined. It could be that somebody is just seeing something in us that they don't like. Maybe it's opinion, maybe it's personality driven, wherever the case may be, but there's also those real deficiencies that we have. Today I think we're going to attack more the real deficiencies, those corrections that are deserved, that are well-meaning, and things of that nature. I do find it interesting that we, as humans, we treat those that we've established lifelong friendships with, those family members that we know have our best interest at heart, those are the ones that we treat with the most distrust from sometimes. And that's interesting to me because those are the people that have established a understanding that they want the best for us. They are looking out for those things. But yet we feel sometimes most comfortable with telling them that they don't know what they're talking about or whatever the case may be. When we look at our children, or when we were children, when our parents corrected us or we corrected our children, they might respond with, "You never let me have fun," or "These are my friends, I want to be with my friends," things of that nature. You know, the immediate response is to maybe question the parent's judgment, even though that parent has maybe some personal experience, whether it's their personal experience or maybe it's looking at others that have fallen in those traps as well. Lifelong friends that know you're making a mistake. They know that your goals are not in line with what you're doing currently. And they may call you out on that. But your response might be something along the lines of, "Well, you don't know the situation. You don't know what's going on at home. Or you don't know what's going on at work. That's why I'm responding this way." And we maybe come back with an attitude of, "I don't need you to tell me what to do or how to be corrected." We might do the same thing with fellow Christians who see our behavior and they understand that it doesn't match God's will. It doesn't line up here. But we might say something, "Well, that's just the way you interpret it. That's not really what it means." Or, "Well, you did it when you were younger. I'm just doing the same thing that you did." And we might use that as an excuse or response for that. Now, as we read this lesson, we're just going to use this as an outline because I want to get to the questions to ponder, those things to ponder at the end. He didn't include any, but I kind of came up with a few that I want us to think on. We'll look at these examples as we go through here, but the first one that he used is the example of Eli. Let's turn to 1 Samuel 3 and verse 13. Now remember, Brother Conchin uses the King James Version throughout this his lesson book, so if we do any of the fill in the blanks, that'll be from where it's at. So somebody read 1 Samuel 3 and verse 13.
"For I have told him that I will judge his house forever for the iniquity which he knoweth, because his sons made themselves vile, and he restrained them not."
All right, so the hymn at the beginning of that is Eli. And if you look at the verses surrounding that, you kind of see the story and the things that they were doing. But what does the last 5 words of that verse say? Huh? He did not rebuke them. That's probably the New American Standard. Does anybody have anything other than he restrained them not?
Yeah.
I did not rebuke them.
Did not rebuke them?
The NASB 95.
Okay. So we've got different words here, but what is it ultimately? Yeah.
The Bible in Basic English says he had no control over them.
Okay, that's an interesting way of looking at it. If you didn't hear, I didn't hear what version that was.
Bible in Basic English.
Bible in Basic English. It said that he did not control them. So we hear the word rebuke, we hear the restrain them not. We hear the word he had no control over them. And now these are adult children. They should have known better. But there's an implication here that he still had some control in the situation. Now, was it from a parent or a priestly? Yeah.
I was just going to add one. I think
Okay.
they were serving at the temple, so there had been over 20 at least.
Yes. So Scott brings up a good point. They had to be at least over a certain age to be serving in the temple. That's where they were serving and doing these things. So we know that they were grown men in the sense that they were responsible for their actions.
I mean, when you think about it, how bad a parent do you have to be to have God call you out?
Huh?
Go down in history.
Yeah. So David said, how bad do you have to be to have God call you out? Well, Eli, he had done some good things, right? I mean, he was doing good things, but in this case, God called him out. And we see that example through, at least this time on earth, because it is here for our reproof, correction, and those things. So Eli, he restrained these adult children not. Now, from a parental aspect, he should have been able to correct that over the years, where he taught them and led them to a correct way of doing things. But also from his priestly duties, his spiritual duties, he should have been able to do that as well. So this is a way of God showing us that Eli is going to pay the price. He's not receiving certain things that he should, if you read the verse after that. But let's turn to 1 Samuel 2 and verse 12 and see why God said this about his son. So going back a chapter, if somebody'd read that.
Notice the New Record Standard. It says, now the sons of Eli were worthless men. They did not know the Lord.
All right. New King James does not say they were worthless men, but it says that they were the sons of Belial. I don't know if I said that correctly, but basically they were not doing the correct things. What did it say again? Worthless men. Worthless men.
Did not know the Lord.
So that's an interesting viewpoint, because they were doing these priestly duties, but because they were doing them incorrectly, it had no worth, according to that translation. So that's interesting to me. Now, I wanted to bring up another example that's kind of similar to this. When we think about Nadab and Abihu, what were they found lacking in? What were they doing that was wrong? They offered strange fire. And what happened to them? They got burned with their own fire. Or godly fire, I guess, more likely. So they were punished for that. Now, before I go down that path, where were Nadab and Abihu not long before this? In whose presence were they? They went up on the mountain when the priest and everyone went up, and God was there. They were in the presence, and they received it as close to you can get to the source, and they still messed this up. Now, I have used the example of who's their daddy? Who was their earthly father? Aaron. And what was Aaron's role? High priest, right? So here is Aaron, who is the high priest, and his sons have messed this up. Now, I've used the example of Aaron, where God tells him, you're not even to mourn for them. You're not even to do anything. Just take them outside let someone take them outside the city. Do not do this. And I took it from the perspective of God wanted Aaron, even though his sons had messed up, to continue to do his priestly duties, to do those things. And we as adults can look at that from a parental aspect, that maybe we have a child that's not faithful. What's our responsibility? It is to continue to do our priestly duties, as it were, to continue to evangelize and do these things, right? Someone told me just recently that they looked at it from a different aspect, and I kind of appreciated that Aaron was being sort of punished for his lack of correcting his sons. He was not allowed to mourn for them. Now, I don't know your opinion on that. I don't think that we'll ever really truly know why they were not allowed, other than maybe some of the Levitical law and things of that nature. But there is a purpose here. Larry, you've got... Oh, okay. You're doing the beard stroking. He's like watching an auctioneer, you know. Oh, okay. Yeah. So when I look at that example, I think about the fact that Aaron should have been correcting his sons, even though they had guidance, they had direct guidance in some fashion, but yet Aaron was possibly punished or corrected in a sense of the things that he did not do for his sons. So, any thoughts so far about those examples, and before we go on to some of these others?
I don't know how much to spend on it, but I had this about like Eli. He being the priest and in that time frame, that era, especially this being the judges era, I mean, this is, I guess you could say early, I don't know how much that would matter in your head, but this is after the Pentateuch, the law of Moses, everything's given, Deuteronomy, etc. is given, right? So he's at the temple, he's helping perform duties, it seems like he's, one of the leaders at the temple, so he should be able to teach the law and know it. One of the requirements that they would have had is that you have these useless sons of Belial, rebellious children, doing the criminal things that you read about later that they were doing to others, taking advantage of the offerings and stuff, taking advantage of women as well. He should have brought them before the gates of the city and had them stoned. He shirked that responsibility to hold them accountable in that sense as well, both as a father and also as, should be an example, priest, a leader at the temple.
So he's looking at the law as far as the duties that he should have had. He should have probably carried them and had them stoned to eliminate that little bit of poison from what was going on. And the reason I was kind of looking, I wanted to see about, I couldn't remember if it was here in my notes, about the scribes and the Pharisees. Why was Jesus, a little more direct and...
It reminds me of James, be not many masters, knowing this, that we shall receive the greater condemnation. It's along that line, I believe, to some degree, at least in my head, my thoughts start going those directions.
Yeah. Well, it's, there's nothing new under the law, under the sun, right? I think about the Spider-Man phrase, with great power comes great responsibility. And here, these men were given power. With that came a great responsibility to do the right things, and they weren't doing it. Jesus, when he was talking to the Pharisees and the scribes, he held them to a higher standard because they should have been the ones that received him and knew what to look for, but yet they weren't. And I'll hold that thought for just a moment, because I want to bring up a point about that in a moment. All right, looking at my time. All right, so just looking at these examples, I'm not going to go through all of them in depth, but when we think about the Jews in Jeremiah's day, when we think about that example, what was their response to Jeremiah's correction? How did they receive that? I'm sorry? Okay. They ignored him. In fact, they were probably a little more than that. It says they didn't grieve, and they didn't have any kind of remorse, and they made their faces even harder. So their response was to become even more ingrained or embedded in what they were doing, kind of plant their foot in the ground and not budge. So when we think about our own view of correction, is that the type of people that we are? Do we plant our foot in the ground and say, I am not going to budge, I have thought this through, I'm not going to look at your point of view, I want to do what I'm doing because I feel like that's the right thing? Or do we have the attitude of 2 Timothy 3:16? Really, 16, 17, if you look at the verses surrounding that, it's talking about he's known those things from his youth. So, and then it goes on into the next chapter, chapter 4, and you really need to take that whole thing and look at it together. But do we have that attitude, or like the Jews, or do we take correction and do it correct our own actions? An example would be Apollos. Can someone explain? Tell me just a quick snippet of what happened with Apollos. All right, so when he came upon Aquila and Priscilla, what was he teaching? What baptism? John's baptism, right? So he was teaching John's baptism, but was he doing anything wrong at that point as far as his attitude is concerned? That's what he knew at the time. Now, was he doing anything wrong with regard to what he should have been teaching and what God wanted him to be teaching? Yeah, I see some head nods. So what did God provide for him in a way of correction?
Revelation, essentially.
By what avenue, what medium? So Aquila and Priscilla, when they heard him, right? Yeah. So, yeah, they took him to the side and they taught him better, a more perfect way. They taught him and expounded on these things that he already had a basis for. He understood the old law. He understood the baptism that John brought, but he did not see the next picture, next part of that. In fact, we see later where Paul comes and he says, "Have y'all, what baptism were you baptized in?" So what did he do? Kind of the same thing. He brought them along, taught them a more complete picture. Now, there are 3 people involved in this, probably more, but 3 in this example. So you've got Apollos, and what was his attitude when he came into the picture to begin with and he was teaching John's baptism? It was one of evangelism, right? He's wanting to do the right thing. He's got this message that he wants to teach people, but he is now corrected. What did his attitude do at that point? He was receptive, right? He wanted to know and look at himself. He wanted to know these things and hear them out. Now, they were well-respected individuals, apparently, and so they had maybe a reputation that would cause him to say, you know what, I probably should listen to these 2 people. He could have, though, said, what is this woman going to teach me? She's not a spiritual leader, or he could have taken any kind of approach with regards to her, and yet he heard her words and changed his ways with a positive attitude from everything that we can tell. So have we done that if somebody corrects us with regards to our spiritual understanding? David?
I'll bring this point up here. There are people out there, we all know them, that like to criticize.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, whatever, they find some reason to criticize. Those kind of correction actions, I guess, they kind of just ignore because that's their personality. It may have good merit or not, but we don't ignore that. When somebody does come to genuinely correct you, we, as the recipient of that, need to realize that's not easy for them to do either.
Mm-hmm.
And we should have some respect for that. Don't just discount them immediately and put it back in their face. It takes a lot of courage to work that up, to go talk to somebody like that. It's not easy. I think Apollos was a perfect recipient.
So David points out that when we do bring correction, when someone corrects us, we have to remember that it's probably not easy for them either because they don't know how we're going to respond. Now, if we have built a relationship that we should, if we have built ourselves as someone that is willing to receive correction, or if we are the one given correction, if we have built the reputation of doing it in love, then that makes it easier, right? So are we doing the preparatory work in order to, 1, receive correction, 2, to give correction? Scott?
Yeah, I just want to build on both of what you just said. I mean, the attitude we're talking a lot about how Apollos received it, his attitude in receiving the correction, but you can also take observation on how they approached it, right? Essentially, for us, they offered to have a Bible study with him. This wasn't like a quippy, snarky, critical remark in passing real quick before you leave out, right? This is like, the way they approached him is, okay, that's great. I can tell this person has a zeal for God. They have the desire to serve God, to preach the truth as far as they understand it. Hey, we'd like to talk with you, like to study and tell you about some of these things. You know, it wouldn't have been written down when we have it and have the printed Bible, but essentially that's what's going on here. So we can learn from that example as well. When we need to be on that side, preparing and thinking about getting that courage up to go and speak to someone, that, you know, we need to also be prepared to sit down and show this out, not just get the nerve to say some quick thing that we don't really understand. We need to be able to study with them and be prepared to have that and show them that we not only just disagree, but we'd like you to see here why that we think you should change a couple of things. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So Scott's pointing out that it wasn't just a quick response or a quick, a little quip at them, kind of making fun or poking or whatever. It was an earnest action. I kind of picture them, if they were doing it incorrectly. You don't even know about Jesus, the baptism of Jesus. I mean, come on, how can we listen to the rest of your message, or you're. Come on, you're not even as good as us. No, they seem to have taken the approach like the Bereans, where they studied. Apollos' attitude was, well, let's dig in. Tell me why. Explain this to me. And he searched and found that they were correct and changed his ways.
They didn't cut him off in the middle of his preaching either.
Yeah.
Rebuke him right there in public to the side.
David says they didn't cut him off in the middle of his preaching. When I used to worship here back in the early 2000s, Glenn Fuller was one of the elders here, and I said something. I actually have the Lord's Supper heading the table today. I said something along the lines of the body that was broken. And now, that is used in a contextual usage, but the way I said it made it sound like his body actually broken bones, that type of thing. And I didn't intend it that way, and Brother Fuller knew that I did not intend it that way. But after services, he just slipped a note. It is somewhere in my Bible right now. He slipped me a note that said a few verses, and he wanted me to look over those. And he just did it gently, and because he had built that reputation with me of friendship, that he wanted me to do correct things, that he knew that I would accept that because, one, I respected him as an elder, I respected his age, I respected his knowledge. I knew that he was someone that I could listen to, but also one that was coming to me in a positive way, that he genuinely wanted me to be better. Whether it's my actions, my attitude, whatever it was, he wanted me to be better. Now, before I attended here, we visited another congregation in town. And I had said something in a prayer or whatever, and someone came up to me afterwards and basically belittled me in front of a group of people. And I think I was given the invitation, and I didn't say explicitly to be baptized. Now, that was wrong. I should have included that. It was implied. Anybody with a listening ear, I started to say brain, that's probably a little harsh, would have known what I was saying. But he had not built up a relationship with me at all. And then when he did bring it, it was almost like he was a pontificating, and he was a greater than thou attitude, a holier than thou. And that, of course, stuck with me in a different way. So I think those are good examples, and I appreciate y'all bringing that up, because I think that's encapsulating that a little bit. I'll pause there. Any comments? Any further comments? Larry?
There are times when you have to bring things up public, but that's why we're given the instructions, go by one, go by two, and then bring it up. You just can't let false doctrine be taught, but there is a general process that leads into a open.
Right. And a correction, right? I have seen elderships that after someone spoke, they'll pull that person to the side, they'll correct it, or, give some more guidance or whatever the case may be. But then they give that individual an opportunity to either correct it themselves if they trusted that individual. Maybe it's the preacher or whatever. Or they will get up and make a statement, later that evening, whatever the case may be, to make sure that people understand this was acknowledged and it was corrected. Now, something that I will add to this is that there must be consistency. That is a crucial piece of correction. I can't try to correct David, but not correct Kelvin for the same type of things. Or, I guess they don't even have to be the same. It must be a consistent correction. And it also has to be something that, don't leave me hanging, because we've already talked about how difficult it is for someone to go and do the correcting, but don't leave me hanging and being the only person making the correction. You're just a fuddy-duddy, why are you correcting me? But, I haven't been corrected, and I've been worshiping here for 20 years, and I've been doing it the same way. I trust my parents, and their spiritual guidance more than you. Why do you think that you're right, Don't leave me out there. We all have to be collectively correcting each other. Kelvin?
Well, we're talking about correction waiting to after, but is it such a case that we need to make correction in really gross error? Maybe a brother said something to the fact that baptism was not necessary in a group of 100 people in here on a gospel meeting or whatever that may be. In time past, I've been under ministers that corrected right after the message, but did it in such a way. It was really tactful the way they did it, but they saw fit and where they thought they should go ahead and correct gross error before the whole left out of here feeling like, okay.
Yeah, what was that? Yeah. What just happened? So obviously it's a very difficult line. Do you create risk a little bit of a chaotic approach? I think it can be done obviously in an appropriate manner. I've seen Terry stand up and correct, not explicitly necessarily, but he will get up and say, you heard this, but let's look also at this verse. So he's expanding on it, and will possibly take that person to the side afterwards and say, this is why I did this. Scott?
I guess along his line, I was trying to think if there's ever an example along the lines of what Brother Kelvin has said. I suppose in very specific situations like when Paul withstood Peter, when he was carried away with essentially racism, basically. He would separate himself from the Gentiles, being concerned with what the others thought of him, right? That is essentially, I guess, in a rare instance, I can make an example of an apostle carrying out his instructions. Because you look at 1 Timothy chapter 5, verse 20, that's Paul writing to Timothy, he's instructing, about, in the context, if an elder is to do something that is to be rebuked in such a way, and it's confirmed, he's definitely doing this. He says, don't accept an accusation except by the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses. But I guess if he does it in front of everybody might have 100 witnesses, right? But the point is, he says in that text, to rebuke such a kind of person in that case before all that all may fear. And we have an example of him doing that. Peter, Cephas, sometimes it's called, some of his writings, he's an elder. And he's rebuking him in the presence of all because he was to be blamed. So there is an example of that, but it's like you're saying, you got to be extremely sure that you're absolutely right if you're going to take that step. And I think that's emphasized even in the text of 1 Timothy 5. He says by 2 or 3 witnesses. So the standard is you really need to know for sure that credible people are coming to you and telling you about this, or that it's maybe in a public happening like you're talking about, like in front of everyone, right? That would be the only example I might add that you could consider in this sense that he's bringing up.
So Paul and Peter is the example you're talking about, where Peter is not going to the Gentiles.
He writes to him about that principle, but you see Paul himself carrying it out
When he's Peter, right. So that is one of the examples in this lesson where it's talking about Paul and Peter and how Paul approached Peter. Now, Peter should have known better. I mean, he's already been told that in Acts 2, but he didn't know it until later when he's dealing with the Gentiles. At that point, he's explicitly told. So Paul called him out in front of people. Now, I can think of another example, Ananias and Sapphira. I mean, that was pretty wide open for everyone. Now, the context there is the church is in its infancy, and there needs to be that statement by God that this will not happen. And so I would like to think the reason we don't see this very often is because we do a good job of vetting before we let people into the pulpit. Now, we can't always control maybe what's happening in a group of people that have just gathered, kind of organically or whatever. But when we let them into the pulpit, we try to understand where they come from. Now, recently we did have someone that the elders didn't know anything about. However, we did know the individual that invited that or recommended that individual. I think it turned out very well. But I will say that my ears were alert, and my spidey senses were there listening. Not that I was necessarily worried, it's just that because I personally had not had experience with the individual. And I think that's something that we all must be doing, whether you're part of the eldership or a member in the congregation. We should always have an alertness to an individual that we don't have experience with, and we haven't built that database of knowledge of where they come from. Did you have your hand up? Oh, you got to quit rubbing your beard.
We're running out of time, but you really can't have this lesson without thinking. Okay, if you want to in loving kindness, you want to correct someone, make sure you got your own house in order first. Don't be a hypocrite. And I know none of us are perfect, but do your best to try to be the type of Christian who could offer, and be accepted, I guess.
Yeah.
That you could offer some guidance to younger Christians, and they go, well, I ain't listening to him, but look how he lives at home.
Yeah. You got to do the preparatory work to be that type of person that receives or gives. I mean, that's David said that we're running out of time, and I don't like that. So let's see. We look at Saul of Tarsus. Ananias told him explicitly what he should do. Now, Paul was a different type of person. He needed that kind of direct feedback, right? Not whereas Apollos, they had the opportunity to kind of take him to the side and teach him, a more perfect way, etc. Saul needed no, you're wrong. You must do this, and that's what he received. Stephen's audience, and I'm just kind of going down through there because I want to get to some of the questions. The Jews in Stephen's audience, they didn't take correction too well, right? To the point that they stoned him. Now, what was his attitude, though? Even though they were trying to correct him, he was correct in what he was doing. He didn't need correction, but yet he still didn't have the attitude of burn these people. He said, forgive them. Do we, even though somebody brings false stuff about us, or maybe is correcting us incorrectly, are we the type that says, okay, I'm not going to respond in a hateful manner. What I'm going to do is maybe it's forcefully set the record straight very directly, or maybe people understand because they know you and they don't see that. Nathan and David. David obviously was incorrect, and Nathan went to him and said, "You are the man. You're that person." Now, what did David could have, he could have done to Nathan what he did to Uriah. He could have found a way for him to disappear if he wanted to, but he realized that he was wrong, and he corrected that action. Maybe not fully because he still got trapped. Now, something about David, though, that I wanted to point out is that he had given the enemies of God an opportunity to speak ill of God. Because now They can look at David and said, well, you don't even love God enough to act right and do the things that he said. They could also make fun of God. You don't even have followers that will do this. So he ruined his own reputation, his own influence in doing those things, you know. The same can apply for us. If someone sees me drinking, how am I going to talk to, or being drunk, how am I going to talk to them about overindulgence in drink? If someone hears me use in foul language, how am I going to correct their foul language use? If someone sees me missing, not sitting up here on this pew where they know that I sit every Sunday, if I don't do that, how can I say your attendance is lacking? You need to be here to edify each other and to strengthen your knowledge and to worship God. So we need to be those people. Now, Jeremy just came in and I've got 40 after, so let's see. I wanted to ask just a few questions. What is something that we need to ponder? What is the purpose of correction? Now, I'll go to Larry for this one. From a military perspective, if I give someone an Article 15, a letter of counseling, a letter of admonishment, what am I trying to do there?
Correct their behavior.
Correct their behavior.
See where they made a mistake, correct their action.
Am I trying to punish them?
No,
Does it come off as punishment?
well, and that's where the person that's being counseled generally always perceives that it's punishment. It's based on the perception. Even though you've got the right attitude going in and trying to make the correction, the person you're correcting almost always is on the defensive because they consider it punishment.
Yeah. So the purpose of our correction is not to punish. That's God's job. Ours is to bring them to a changed behavior. Now, the person that's receiving that, they've got to vote in the matter as well on how they receive it. Are they going to receive it correctly or not? That's on them. That's their decision. We, though, can control how we correct. If we're the ones being corrected, we have a vote in that. We can choose to change our behavior or act a fool. What is our attitude towards receiving correction, but also what is our attitude in giving it? Now, we've already kind of covered that, but I wanted to talk a little bit more about the consistency being crucial. Why do football players want to go play for Nick Saban when he was coaching? It was because of the process, the consistency. When he gets up in the morning and eats a Little Debbie, he goes in there to the office, he spends an hour sitting at his desk doing whatever, it's practice. He goes out there and he has a rigid timeline. When that whistle blows, they stop doing whatever exercise or whatever they were doing and they move to the next one. And that's the standard. Why do law students want to go to Harvard? It's because they've built a reputation of consistently having highly skilled lawyers. Now, we can argue whether or not that's true or not, but you get the point. Why do music students want to go to Juilliard? Jackson would tell you it's because it's got a name and that's all. But it's because they have a reputation of producing quality musically inclined students. If I hire a trainer, am I looking for a trainer that will call me out for sleeping in, or am I looking for one that says, you know what, you worked really hard this week, you can lay out, a couple of days. No, you're looking for someone that is training you and will hold you to a standard. Now, when we take that and look at it from maybe the perspective of Jesus, did Jesus ever not correct sin? If he saw sin, did he walk past it? Consistently, he corrected it. Now, how did Jesus correct the woman at the well or the woman that was brought to him for adultery? What did he do? What was his attitude towards that person? He loved them, right? And he showed that in a very direct, very firm, don't do this anymore, go and sin no more, but he took them as a lost sheep. He's gentle with it. Now compare and contrast that with how he responded to correcting the scribes and Pharisees. What was his attitude and his corrective nature for them? Very direct. In fact, hypocrites, called them names and told them, if you had learned this before when I told you to learn it, or if you'd looked at the scriptures, the Holy Scriptures, and understood this, we wouldn't be having this discussion, and I wouldn't have to be correcting this person over here. David?
Plus, he knew their attitudes and their hearts.
Yeah.
How they were accepted.
And of course, he knew their attitudes and hearts, and he had already dealt with them some, so he knew how they were going to receive it, so he had to be. Now, does that give us an example in how we correct? Do we tailor our approach of correction? I think the answer would be yes, because each of us are in a different point in our Christian life, our understanding, our intelligent level, IQs are different. Our learning, the way we learn, maybe I'm a visual learner and you're a hearing learner, a doer learner, whatever the case may be. We have different things, so we have to do that differently. So, I know the bell rang, so I'll just give you a few things that I want you to ponder as you go home and think about this lesson. If you had a chance to pick your parents, would you choose ones who would let you get by with everything, or ones that set boundaries? Studies have shown that children like boundaries. They want to know what is set. They don't like chaos. It makes them chaotic as well. They want those boundaries. They want appropriate boundaries and appropriately applied punishment for going outside those boundaries. When you choose your friends, do you choose those who let you slip into a little sin every now and then, or those that will call you out on it? When you choose a congregation, do you choose one with members who expect you to faithfully worship, work, attend, and edify? And one that I personally would like your thoughts on, maybe privately, when you choose an eldership to work under the leadership of, do you choose one that will hold you to godly standards? Do you look for ones, and do you want someone, an eldership, that is going to call you out and say, you are incorrect? Or do you want just a location that is sound and you come and go, I've checked my box? Or do you want people to help you grow? Do you want that? Any final comments before the kids start coming in?
The same thing about choosing a spouse.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that one, but that's a good one. Choosing a spouse as well. Are you choosing a spouse that's going to help you, is going to be helpmeet or not? Scott?
Yeah, like the elders are examples of the flock, so like, if you're out looking, you should be looking for elders who are going to help you become what you should be.
Mhm.
And so they're just like you're saying, if you just, the standard is only, well, there's no false doctrine preached here, and that's it. You're really going to grow much
Yeah.
compared to someone who's interested in the lost, interested in the sick, interested in the widow, etc. Like
Yeah. Thank you, everyone.